Right.
Right. Okay, no?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Fine,
Thank
fine.
you. Thank you, Professor Manori. So I will, I think Professor Kolita mentioned a lot of things, but I will try to see the best that I can do regarding the current situation and also about this economic crisis that we are going through. So it's our theme is on Buddhism and current economic crisis. Just I thought I'll put up something as to what Professor Kolita mentioned on what are the problems that we are currently having. The current economic crisis, the foreign and local debt is unbearable. As at end of 2022, it was US dollars 83.6 billion. So if you convert to rupees, you can see how big it is. And Sri Lanka, of course, is a bankrupt nation. That is, we are unable to repay our foreign and local loans. So that problem is there. Then very low or nil foreign exchange reserves. Of course, currently it has gone up 3.7 US dollars billion in June and compared to 3.4 in the previous month. But in 2022, it was only for 50 million US dollars. Then our imports are far exceeding our exports. So as a result, we have a budget deficit. Then the depreciation of the currency, you remember it was 200 rupees, then it went to 350, 360, and now maybe hovering around 325, 335. High inflation and prices going up. Although we say inflation has come down, still prices are very high. Then, of course, the biggest problem of many professional, skilled, unskilled students live in the country. This, I think, I just put it up because currently people are talking about this. It's there in the headlines of newspapers called the domestic debt optimization. These are extension of the maturity period of the treasury bill and treasury bonds held with the central bank to help the government to reduce the annual repayment obligation and to spread it over a period of years. Affected parties, as you know, included the pension funds such as EPF and ETF. However, one should realize that there is no reduction in the capital amount or what we call a haircut. So it's only that there is an adjustment that is made on the interest payment. Now, just talking a little about this whole thing, I thought that it might be good as for us to go through differences between the traditional and the Buddhist economics. Because while traditional economics concentrates on the self-interest, the Buddhist view challenges it by changing the concept of self to anatta or no self. Then the traditional economists emphasize importance to maximizing profits and individual gains, while the underlying principle of Buddhist economics is to minimize suffering or losses for all living or non-living things. Then there is a difference with respect to the concept of desire. Traditional economics encourages material wealth and desire in which people attempt to accumulate more wealth to satisfy those cravings. In contrast, in Buddhist economics, importance is given to simplify one's desires. Going further, views on the market are also different. While many economists advocate maximizing markets to a point of saturation, Buddhist economists aim at minimizing violence. Buddhist economists advocate ahimsa or non-violence. Traditional economists try to maximize instrumental use where the value of any entity is determined by its marginal contribution to the production output, while Buddhist economists feel that the real value of an entity is neither realized nor given importance to. Buddhist economists attempt to reduce instrumental use and to form caring organizations that will be rewarded in terms of trust among the management, co-workers, and the employees. Then the traditional economists tend to believe that bigger is better and more is more, whereas Buddhist economists believe that small is beautiful and less is more. Traditional economics gives importance to gross national product, whereas Buddhist economists give importance to gross national happiness. So if you look at Buddhism and economic well-being, Buddhist economists do not believe in measuring standard of living by the amount of consumption, because according to them, obtaining maximum well-being as a result of minimum consumption is more important than obtaining maximum well-being from maximum consumption. So that's another difference that we can see. Then on Buddhism define well-being, the Buddhist view of the well-being is more powerful than any other definitions, which emphasizes four interdependent aspects: the material, the social, the mental, and the spiritual. Now I'd like to speak because Buddhist Economics by E.F. Schumacher. Actually, he was a German born British economist, and he was serving in Burma. And during this time, he was able to go to the villages, and as a result of that, he has been able to prepare this term. Actually, he earlier called it he studied the villages and he called it the village-based economics, which later he transformed to Buddhist economics. So this is something that he has been talking of. The right livelihood is one of the requirements of Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. It is clear, therefore, that there must be such a thing as Buddhist economics. That's reasoning he has given. While the materialist is mainly interested in goods, the Buddhist is mainly interested in liberation. But Buddhism is the middle way and therefore in no way antagonistic to physical well-being. It is not wealth that stands in the way of liberation, but the attachment to wealth. Not the enjoyment of pleasurable things, but the craving for them. The keynote of Buddhist economics, therefore, is simplicity and non-violence. Going further, the modern economist is using to measuring, these are all what Schumacher has been talking of, which I'm putting down, which is quite relevant, is used to measuring the standard of living by the amount of annual consumption, assuming all the time that a man who consumes more is better off than a man who consumes less. A Buddhist economist would consider this approach excessively irrational, since consumption is merely a means to human well-being. The aim should be to obtain the maximum of well-being with the minimum of consumption. Then the Buddhist teaching, cease to do evil, try to do good. From the point of view of Buddhist economics, therefore, production from local resources for local needs is the most rational way of economic life, while dependence on imports from afar and the consequent need to produce for export to unknown and distant people is highly uneconomic and justifiably only in the exceptional cases on a small scale. So you can see the difference, what we are talking of the current day and what the Buddhist economics is talking about. Every follower of the Buddha ought to plant a tree every few years and look after it until it is safely established. And the Buddhist economists can demonstrate without difficulty that the universal observation of this rule would result in a high rate of genuine economic development independent of any foreign aid. Much of the economic decay of Southeast Asia, as of many other parts of the world, is undoubtedly due to a heedless and shameless neglect of trees. I'm sure most of you who are here, the older generation will know that when you build a house or when you do anything, the tree was the most precious thing, that always you have the fruit trees that are grown in your garden. Then modern economics does not distinguish between renewable and non-renewable materials, as its very method is to equalize and quantify everything by the means of a money price, which we call cost, or maybe when you go to buy something, it's a selling price. Thus, taking various alternatives, fuels like coal, oil, wood, or water power, the only difference between them recognized by modern economics is relative cost per unit. The cheapest is automatically the one to be preferred, as to do otherwise would be irrational. And uneconomic. Then Buddhist point of view, of course, is this will not do. The essential difference between non-renewable fuels like coal and oil on the one hand, and renewable fuels like wood and water power on the other cannot be simply overlooked. Non-renewable goods must be used only if they are indispensable, and then only with the greatest care and the most meticulous concern for conservation. So those are some of the things that was mentioned by Schumacher, but there is also the Buddhist economics that was stated by Venerable Dhammapitaka, P.A. Payutto. He's a Thai Buddhist monk who has done this, and he also mentioned some of the similar things which I thought it might be relevant to put down. Right livelihood, one of the factors of the Eightfold Path. I think this was also mentioned in Schumacher, and he also mentions it. Buddhism is best suited to a spiritual approach, but one of a number of interdependent disciplines working in concert towards the common goal of social, individual, and environmental well-being. Schumacher affirms that the inclusion of the factor of right livelihood in the Eightfold Path. This then adheres, of course, to strict ethical standards. Now, that's another important thing in Buddhism called Charya Dhamma, and Dhamma in its larger sense is Satya Dhamma, truth, or Sabbhava Dhamma, reality. Then Buddhist economics would investigate how a given economic activity affects the three interconnected spheres of human existence. That is the individual, the society, and the nature or the environment. Today, I think even in our normal economics and even accounting and other areas, these are the reporting aspects of these areas are taken. Buddhist scriptures that good actions lead to good results and bad action leads to bad results. Unethical business practices have direct economic consequences. Factors such as personal morality or emotions, such as greed and fear, and do affect economic outcomes. Then also the Thoreau goes on further. The major characteristics of Buddhist economics, he talks of the middle way economics, the realization of true well-being, and the middle way economics of not harming oneself or others. Then some of the other things he has mentioned, of course, there are a number of areas, but I've not been able to go to everything. I've taken some of those. The Buddha taught that basic material needs must be met before spiritual development can begin. When the Buddha saw the peasant's condition, he asked the city elders to arrange some food for the poor man, and only when the peasant had eaten his fill and was refreshed did the Buddha start. Listening to the discourse, the peasant realized the fruit of stream entry, the first stage of enlightenment. The Buddha had fulfilled his purpose in traveling to Allah. Now, actually, I put this for one particular purpose because today we are really having a major problem of poverty, and especially in the schools. Because although the Ministry of Education are taking various action, some of the rural schools, they are really having very great difficulty in providing meals to the students. That is why I put this down, that is something very essential. So even to study for the children, that they should have a proper meal, and that maybe that we should something take note of. Then happiness of freedom from debt. Now, that's another thing that we have to remember, because today our country is in great debt. The following teaching was given to the merchant Anathapindika. And what is the happiness of freedom from debt? Ananasukha. Herein, a son of good family owes no debt, be it great or small, to anyone at all. He experiences pleasure and happiness, reflecting, I owe no debts, be they great or small, to anyone at all. This is called the happiness of freedom from debt. Of course, there were the other happiness that he mentioned, but I thought that this should be something that we should look at, considering the current problems that we are having. Then the other thing, of course, the Buddhist path to accumulate wealth, because some of them feel that Buddhists should not accumulate wealth, but it says, do not violate the 5 precepts. Refrain from killing, stealing, adultery, lying, taking intoxicants. Buddha stresses that wealth alone is not evil, but the accumulation of wealth should be non-harming. Now, that's the important thing that we need to consider. These, of course, I had put down in Pali, so it goes to the same thing. Then looking at some of the areas of management now, although I put business management, I'm sure Professor Kolita will know that this management is very essential in the medical profession, especially in the health sector. Today, where they're having so much of problems. Buddhism emphasizes on a stress-free and peaceful life of coexistence, makes even business management simple yet effective. Today, the aspects of the spiritual philosophy, such as meditation, morality, and wisdom, are applied in many cases, including business. High level of ethical practice, and to make sure that their employees and customers are satisfied, mindful, and happy. Maintain a clean profile while earning a profit at the same time. Focuses on the well-being of every individual related to the business. Good management is the essence of good business practices. Then financial management. Actually, today we are in this big mess because there is no proper financial management. While Buddha's teachings lead monks to follow the path to enlightenment by living a non-materialistic life, it does not discourage laypersons from making a profit. In fact, the Buddha, in his teachings, has encouraged people to work for the well-being of their families first, and only then to engage in charity. Buddha has emphasized on earning only by ethical means. The Singalovada Sutta mentions that one's income should be divided into 4 parts, where one part should be consumed, 2 parts reinvested, and the remainder saved for the future, which I think is not an easy thing today, considering the cost of living. Then the philanthropy and the corporate social responsibility. Charity is an important part of the Buddhist tradition. Buddha has stated that the money given as charity benefits both the donor and the receiver. Different Buddhist scripts have highlighted that while there is no limitation on how much one can give to others, it should not be done at the expense of the things needed for one's own personal livelihood. In a way, it suggests sustainable practices in terms of financial contributions for social causes. In the modern day world, businesses follow this concept through corporate social responsibility and philanthropy initiatives. Today, they have adopted certain models of CSR to benefit the society, which ultimately ensures long-term sustainability in business practices. So that also helps, because the business, if they look after the people around them, certainly they will support them. Then, of course, if you look at some of the global trends of Buddhist management, top executives and some of the world's major companies have also been practicing Buddhist management to achieve success in their professional and personal lives. Jeff Weiner, the founder of professional networking site LinkedIn, is one such executive who believes in compassionate leadership as a core means in organizational management. Mark Benioff, the founder and CEO of an American cloud computing company, Salesforce, is a Zen Buddhism practitioner who is known for introducing meditation and mindfulness training in his company after following the advice of Buddhist monks. The most notable Buddhist businessman perhaps is Apple's co-founder, late Steve Jobs, who was a follower of Zen Buddhism and relied on meditation and a strict vegetarian diet. Then multinational Japanese corporations such as Kaisora and TDK, for instance, have been practicing Zen management for a long time to achieve peace and productivity at work. Among the top Buddhist entrepreneurs is Korean electronics giant Samsung's chairman Lee Kun-hee, who brought changes in the work ethics of Samsung with the famous quote, "Change everything except your wife and kids." Of course, higher education can really play a major role if higher educational institutions are able to develop courses that combine Buddhist philosophies and ethical business management practices. They can prove to be beneficial in terms of sustainability of businesses and increasing productivity. Mindfulness is one of the most important aspects of Buddhist management. Mindfulness is a state of awareness of being the present moment, but also being aware of one's thoughts and emotions. It allows for better concentration and more productivity. Of course, you remember that we had two Buddhist universities, the Vidyoja University and Vidyalankara University. Now, even their names are not there. But at least if they can start some programs where the Buddhist economics can be tied to the business field, definitely those who go out to the start businesses will be able to do quite well. In Sri Lanka as a Buddhist country, the Republic of Sri Lanka shall give to Buddhism the foremost place, and accordingly it shall be the duty of the state to protect and foster the Buddha Sasana, while assuring to all religions the rights granted by Articles 10 and 14(1)(e). So I think we may be one of the few countries which have this in the constitution. Buddhism is the major religion followed in Sri Lanka, with 70.2% of the population identified as Buddhists. Of the remaining Sri Lankan population, 12.6 Hindus, 9.7% as Muslims, and 6.1% identified as Christians. Then, of course, the most important thing, can we apply Buddhist economic principles to solve the current economic crisis? What are the economic and financial problems we are facing now? Sri Lanka is a bankrupt nation. We are unable to repay foreign loans. We have to restructure the loans. As I mentioned, DDO is there. Then we need to bring in accountability and transparency. Cultivate friendly relationship with foreign countries. Actually, this accountability and transparency is really not present, because although we talk of the private sector, it's mainly that we are affected due to the government sector not managing the funds and resources properly. Then no foreign exchange. I think it was also mentioned by Schumacher that you should try to maybe use and produce as much as local. So whether we can go into that, give priority for local production, and of course exports that are going. But today, even the exports, we are having a problem because of the total recession in all countries, and that is also affecting us. So that means we need to think of the local production and of course maybe mainly in the agricultural sector and other areas. Then depreciation of the currency, as I said, from 200 to 350, you can see that all the prices are double and triple, as a result of that, because we are mainly dependent on a lot of imports, which we can really produce in Sri Lanka. Then inflation and prices going up. So these are another problem. But for this, there has to be some way that we can control it. We have strong regulation, price control and cost control. But today's price control is something that they have to do it in a professional way, because you have what is called, they should maintain their records, then we can look at it and check it. But today, a lot of these things are not present, and maybe they are taking decisions not in a proper way, which is harmful to the local people. Then expenditure is more than income. Reduce expenditure and increase income. Live within our means. I think this is the most important thing of live within our means. But although we practice it at our homes, when you think of the government and the ministries, they are really not doing that. Everyone is living it up, you know. So we need to see how we can do it, because today you know that there are high taxes, everything. But then ultimately, today's papers, I read that out of the income, 90% is going to pay the salaries of the public servants. So then you have to ask the question, what is the value they are creating to the society? I don't know whether anyone can answer. Of course, if you go to a hospital, you will get free treatment, but ultimately, if you want to go to the drugs are not available. You have to go outside and buy it. So there has to be, as I said earlier, good management and maybe dedication and integrity and honesty, all which is there in Buddhism. And we are a Buddhist country, but ultimately, the practice is no longer there. Then prevent wastage and corruption. Now we need strict laws. We need to punish people if they are doing these activities, but we hardly see anything happening. Good governance. Now that's another important application and enforcement. Environmental degradation. I was telling that we should grow trees, but when you see the television and you hear the stories, people are really not bothered about it. Now we are having a severe drought. What is the reason for this drought? Have they cut down all our forests? So these are things that we need to take into mind, because ultimately, due to natural disasters, it will really result in more problems to the people. Then, of course, to evaluate government ministries, departments, all using public money. You know, public money means we have to all contribute by taxes or indirect taxes in everything. But what is the value that they are creating to the society? It's a very simple thing that the government can do to show the value that you are creating to the society. Then the priority for agricultural production and self-sufficiency in food, because if you are able to do that, certainly, even if we do not have sufficient foreign exchange, it will really help the people and they will have sufficient food available to them. Then education, higher education, you know the mess that we are in. Everyone wants to go abroad. We cannot finish our degrees in other countries. You finish it in 21 years. Here you finish 24, 25. Doctors come out at 26, 27. So you can see the wastage of time, the youth of this country, because we have an aging population, more and more people getting old and then going off, but the young people are stuck in this whole thing. So unless some corrective action is taken, we will not be able to really get out of this. Even if we repay the loans, if we don't correct these matters, we'll never be able to come out. Prevent political interference in the public service and make them. So these are other things, you know, because we have very qualified people in the public service. They have to sit an exam and then get into it. But ultimately, when they get in, then they do not have the freedom to carry out their duties and functions. Now, that's, I think, one of the major reasons that we are in this mess, because the public servants are really not accountable, and also they don't have the freedom to carry out their duties and functions. So that's something that we all need to look into. Then now, this is another important area, what is the Gross National Happiness Index in Bhutan. The Gross National Happiness is a term coined by His Majesty, the fourth King of Bhutan, Jigme Singye Wangchuk, in the 1970s. The concept implies that sustainable development should take a holistic approach towards notions of progress and give equal importance to non-economic aspects of well-being. It was stated that gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product. That's what we are having today. Since then, the idea of gross national happiness, or GNH, has influenced Bhutan's economic and social policy and also captured the imagination of others far beyond its borders. I'm sure I know that even people in Harvard are really engaged in this, and so at very high level that this TNH has been taken. The TNH index includes both traditional areas of socio-economic concerns such as living standards, health, and education. I think that's the area that we were boasting very much, but unfortunately now I think it's taking a different turn, and less traditional aspects of culture and psychological well-being. It is a holistic reflection of the general well-being of the Bhutanese population rather than a subjective psychological ranking of happiness alone. 4 pillars of good governance: sustainable socio-economic development, cultural preservation, environmental conservation. I think that's a very important area on the environment. Then these some area of the GNH index. People who have achieved sufficiency in less than 50% are unhappy, and they comprise 10.4% of the population. A total of 48.7% of the people have sufficiency in 50 to 65% of the domains and are called narrowly happy. A group of 32.6% called extensively happy have achieved sufficiency in 66 to 76% in between 6 and 7 domains. And in the last group, 8.3% people are identified as deeply happy because they enjoy sufficiency in 77% or more weighted indicators, which is the equivalent of 7 or more of the 9 domains. So it's something that maybe we need to consider. Then this is another one, is sufficiency economy philosophy in Thailand. I thought that I'll just mention this also. The sufficiency economy philosophy conceived by His Majesty Kim Bhumibol Adulyadej the Great is one of the most famous and enduring legacies. Thailand's homegrown approach to sustainable development. The 3 components are reasonableness or wisdom, moderation, and prudence. At the individual and family level, it means living a simple life, living within one's means, and refraining from taking advantage of other people. At the community level, it involves joining together to participate in decision-making, developing mutually beneficial knowledge, and appropriately applying technology. It favors the natural principle wherein one employs natural resources readily available in each locality. At the national level, it postulates a holistic approach with an emphasis upon appropriateness, competitive advantage, low risk, and avoiding overinvestment. It involves keeping abreast with what is happening elsewhere in the world, hedging investments, and reducing imports and over-dependence on other countries. So that is all what I had to say. I think certainly there are a lot of things I think even Professor Kolita mentioned. So in the event that if you have any areas or any questions or comments, I'm sure there might be a lot of comments that one would like to make. Certainly we can maybe jointly look at it and try to consider what could be done.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Watawala. That was an excellent talk, which covered all the pertinent areas in this subject. We had clearly gone through all the Buddhist principles of what economics is, first starting with the Western problem, and then what is taught in Buddhism. And then what was most important is you summed up by giving some very important points that we could apply to resolve this issue in the Sri Lankan setting. Eventually boiling down, as you all spoke all along, a simple way of life, a simple lifestyle, living within our means. Don't blindly follow the West. Now we can talk about this, I think. Lakshman, Mallory and all, he lived in a different era, you know, and in a where all this technology was not freely available. And there were large families, mind you, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 children in a family, you know, but we never suffered. We never suffered the economic crisis. And you know, we have plants, you mentioned about growing plants, or I can remember when the house was built at the Himalaya. You know, when the foundation is laid, mango trees are planted. So by the time the house comes up, you know, the trees also have grown. So this was not in the rural community, this was in the city. But I can remember eating mangoes, plucking the fresh mangoes, ripened mangoes, they're ripened in the tree. Every day I go and look at the various stages of ripening, how the color changes, And at the precise moment when the when the tree is ready to reject it, I pluck it and eat it then and there. So we never took vitamins. It was all natural food, no vitamins, not adulterated, no poisons, no agrochemicals, nothing. So why was that? That was because people were content with what they had. They were living within their means. They never borrowed money. If you had money, you would buy a car. Otherwise, your money was enough to buy a cycle. You buy a cycle and go in that. If you don't have that also, you go in a bus first, and then amass the wealth, and then utilize it to improve your living conditions. That's the way it went. So now people want to become rich overnight. So they borrow a lot of things. That is what so there is the Western market also exploiting on this situation, giving credit cards to those who can't even afford to buy anything. The power of the marketing is so strong, even a poor rural villager will get the credit card, get the televisions which they can't even afford. Why? It's called credit. See, they don't feel that they're paying anything for it. And at the end of the day, after a couple of months, they lose the television as well as the huge loan to pay, capital plus interest. Banks, I mean, Professor Lakshman might know, having, in the person of so many banks. Banks love to give these credit cards, all on credit. They love it. Why? That is, their interest is not to solve economic problems, it is to make profits by exploiting the poor. So this is why the Buddhist, in the Buddhist teaching, it's never like that. You have to make money, that's fine, but by moral means. Moral means. Amass wealth by moral means, by the strict Buddhist ethical principles, and not by exploiting others. And even in this current economic crisis, you can see people have become not millionaires, but billionaires as a result of the economic crisis. That is exploitation. It's not a case of finding a solution to the problem. They exploit for their gain by all unethical bad deeds. This is what happens, and they are not even, I think you mentioned about instrument use in the Western economic model. They just chop off all the trees and create acres and hectares of one type of plantation, maybe plantain trees on acres, destroying our biodiversity, which is very detrimental. They are only concerned about the rapid gain, the marketing and the money they can get rapidly in short term, without any sense, without caring anything at all for the future generations. But Buddhist economics is different. You think of the future. You leave something for the future. You're not going to solve an economic problem or the current economic problem by leaving nothing for the future generations. There will be no earth or plantations to talk about. Then they create food and do something else, and that vicious cycle continues. So it's a very important topic, very beautifully addressed in all aspects. I'm sure there are a lot of comments or questions that you need clarification. Please raise your hand, and if you want to make any comments, please do so. It's the time.
Kolita, there was a hand raised. Ajanta
Yeah.
Jayatunga.
Go ahead, please. Ajanta, I can't see you on the screen.
Ajanta, did you raise your hand?
Oh, no.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
I mean,
Mama,
it may
go
be an
ahead.
idiot question.
Nothing is
Professor
idiotic, no
Watawala,
question is stupid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
when you look
Okay.
at it, the Mahayana Buddhist countries, Japan, China, Korea, are a lot better off. Not a lot, but really better off, without a doubt, than the Theravada countries, Burma, even Thailand, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Laos. I wonder why that is.
I think there should be someone who might be able to give a better answer than me. I can see Dr. Sumana. Dr. Sumana, you are there, no? Why not we ask Dr. Sumana to, because he is now in the Western world, he can give a better answer on that.
Thank you, Professor. Well, I was very inspired by your summarizing all the problems of economic crisis, Professor. It is, as Professor Kolita just mentioned, it is completely covering all aspects that we could think of economic crisis in Sri Lanka. And I mean, of course, without going into the answer to the question raised by Professor Manori, let me just mention that when I now live in Sweden, I noticed that this country, without emphasizing any religion whatsoever, even Buddhism, I think the country has benefited a lot from Buddhism, Buddhist economics. And when I, read suttas like Chakravarti Sihanada Sutta, very much you find that countries like Sweden, of course, a lot of countries in Scandinavia and also other neighboring countries, have benefited a lot from these teachings without mentioning the names of these suttas or these teachings, because equal, kind of benefits and how the gaps between the poor and the rich have been minimized. All these are very much appreciable in countries like here. So as Professor Manori asked, it is very clear that, of course, Mahayana countries are economically better off than Theravada countries when you just look at them like that. But this is not a matter connected with the religion. It is not due to Theravada or Mahayana that they have become either poor or rich. Because I think they have not benefited from their own teachings. I don't think that Mahayana countries have benefited from Buddhism for developing the countries. And equally, Sri Lanka or, Theravada countries have not benefited from Buddhism to enrich their economics. If they have benefited from Buddhist economics, for example, as Professor Watawala has pointed out, Sri Lanka must be one of the richest countries in the world. Theravada countries could be the richest countries in the world if they really benefit from the teachings of the Buddha. Because the teachings are so rich that many may not have even reached the principal, message of the teaching. They all know that they are Buddhist by birth. They have a very good certificate, the birth certificate, which has an identity called Buddhist. Buddhist identity is there. Maybe it is not mentioned even in birth certificate. But anyway, they are born Buddhists. I think it is not something to blame in this case. It's very important to see. I think all of us should see where we should start these projects. Where we should launch our projects. Should we start from the leadership or politicians, or should we start with the education systems, or should we start with temples, or who are going to start all these? Because there are a lot of projects, there are a lot of plans, and there are discourses which give the message for the country to benefit from. But actually, I feel, I'm a Buddhist scholar actually. Because I have my degrees in Buddhism. I did my PhD in Buddhist psychology, Buddhist philosophy. Of course, mindfulness is my major. And Buddhist philosophy I did for my first degree, and then the master's I did at Oxford University. And there all I studied Buddhism and Pali. And then when I read these, theses and subjects and all kinds of texts connected to Buddhist philosophy, I feel very sorry and I feel pity on our fellow people, I mean, our members, our people, our leaders, our politicians, and when they can benefit from these teachings, and who are going to start anything connected. Of course, in our capacity, we do certain things, but they are not that effective because they are only benefiting a very few, little number of people. Still, we, as Professor Watawala organizes, we have talks we listen to, and we also share some, Buddhist ideas. We also lead retreats. We have various, small groups in Scandinavia and elsewhere, where we talk on Buddhism. We talk on Buddhist economics. We talk on meditation, mindfulness, etc. And as Professor Kolitha started the session with the 5 precepts, and he very importantly mentioned the honesty, how honest we should take the 5 precepts. And when we take the 5 precepts, that alone is a very useful foundation if somebody benefits from it for developing a country. And Buddhist economics, covering all the aspects that Professor Watawala has mentioned now, will be a useful summary, as Schumacher, they have already given the message to the world. Small is beautiful, etc. And his books and his articles I have read, and also Professor Watawala has, beautifully connected some, ideas from Venerable Payutto and all these scholars, teachers. But still, I mean, of course, it is very important for you to also gather in some committees and see where we can start, how we can plant the seeds of this development in a country like Sri Lanka, at least.
Dr.
Then we can
Ratnayaka, in your list, you didn't include the Buddhist monks. I'm talking, the fault of the leaders, fault of the politics, but where the monks, I'm not talking of the Aranya monks, but there are the other group who are in the temple monks who interact a lot with the community. That's where I think the problem might have even started.
That is one of the main reasons that Professor says. Yeah, it is true, really. It is true. I mean, when I say leaders, it doesn't mean political leaders alone. Leaders in the clergy, I mean, in the monks and among monks, and leadership could be even given to parents in a family. Leaders as teachers at schools, leaders, professors and other teachers at the universities, and also political leaders as such. So we can say about leaders covering even monks and nuns, etc. But anyway, if you all, I mean, as Buddhists, of course, brothers, friends of Buddhists, Buddhists, and I see that you have various important issues to talk on. And it's very important, I think, we all, or you all gather and reflect on where to start, how we can launch such projects, maybe at temples, maybe at schools. I mean, I appreciate that Venerable, Udayirigam Dhammajiva Thera launches some projects based on Satipasala. And Professor Watawala invited him several times, and he gave talks, to so many people. I mean, there were more than 200 people, I think, who attended the talks.
If I were to interrupt you, Sumana, for a moment, I think there's a comment related to that by Samantha Jayatilaka. It's in the chat box. Yes, moving forward is to educate the current young population, incorporating like what Venerable Dhammajiva is conducting via Satipasana. So Sri Lanka doesn't suffer from a brain drain. Currently, professionals like doctors, nurses, etc., are being tempted, poached by the Western countries. We spend, the taxpayers are paying to train them, millions are spent. We are paying, the so-called poor country, the economically bankrupt country, is spending millions to train these doctors, nurses, and other professionals. And who is benefiting from that? the so-called rich Western countries. So these are things that have to be looked into seriously. Where you are going to put a curtain, this
But
cannot
Kolita,
change.
that is nothing
Yeah.
new. I mean, the magnitude may look big now,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I mean, education here, right up to the postgraduate, is free.
Yes.
At least in medicine, right up to the MD is free. But I mean, not now. So many went and nothing else but greener pastures.
Nothing happened. Exactly. So this is,
So that is
is
nothing
again,
new.
but yet they call themselves Buddhist. Now, Professor Watawala pointed out, Buddhism, contentment.
Now there are push
Contentment.
factors. There one time there were only pull factors.
Yeah,
Like,
now they are pushing.
No, actually, Professor Kolji, it's the system, because you
Yeah.
see, if people today, why you find people going, one thing is, say, unemployment, so they have no jobs. So a lot of the people are queuing up and going, but those are mainly the people at a lower level, and maybe certain skilled people are going. But of course, once they go, I think those people come back and they also remit money to Sri Lanka, which I think at the moment is a very big bonus for Sri Lanka because that helps them quite a lot. But the other thing is now say, I have spoken to many doctors, they are saying, we are having a good practice here, but then what is going to happen to my children? How can we send them abroad if the country has no foreign exchange? Do you think that we can educate them abroad? So there are a lot of areas, and I think education is one of the key areas. And then, as I said, the age of qualifying, now age of qualifying is really a major problem, no? You finish your A-level at 19, then you wait 1 or 2 years at home, then you go to university, 24, 25, and at that age, you can't get employment. Even the people in the business sector or the commercial world will like to employ people at 21 or 22 because they can be trained at that age. But once the age is more, then there is a problem. So I think there are a lot of problems faced by the country, but these are really sometimes, I feel that this accountability is one of the things, we have to give authority. Now, supposing if you take the universities, supposing if you take Colombo University, you tell them you are responsible for, the vice chancellor is responsible for running the university. At the moment, the government has no money. Government will give you, say, 50 million, no? Whatever money that is there. But from your side, then you conduct whatever courses that are there free. But in addition to that, you conduct other additional courses and you earn your money and you run the organization. Then, if all the major universities are told to do that, I'm sure the professors and others, they can also earn. They will also do more work. Like the general practice, special practice for the doctors, where they can. So some sort of thing which will help them to clear all these things, but there has to be a self-interest. Because today people have lost that interest, When they say government, I think no one cares for it. Even if you look at the Buddhist education, there were about 300 odd schools, that 300 or 175, 180 Buddhist schools at the time of the takeover. But now if it is a government school, do you think that same Buddhist education is going on? No. So that is why, so everything that the government has taken is really going to ruination, So we now have to take an active interest in this whole thing and see. I feel the public-private partnership has to come in, because that means there is a certain amount given. Now, so even if you take the earlier time before the nationalization, all these schools, the salaries were paid by the government, but the management was done by an organization with the Buddhist ideas in. So something like that, even your hospitals, everywhere, I think we need to go to a new concept where we can change this whole thing and come out of this current situation, for which I think we have to have a complete change in the way that we are doing things.
Thank you. And I think there's another comment coming from Analaya. Perhaps many factors are involved in economic management of a country. Example, control of corruption or intolerance of corruption. Another major factor which is contributing to all this economic crisis, corruption at every level. We are very conveniently pointing our fingers only at the politicians, but there's corruption at every level in all institutions, hospitals, even among professionals. There's so much of corruption that is taken as the norm. Giving bribes is like a norm. This is all against the fundamental principles of Buddhism, and all these things have in their own way contributed little by little to this economic crisis. So just as much as you have raised some very important points in how to bring about this change in the system and so on, but I think all of us at an individual level can bring about these changes at a micro level. Wherever you are working, in your family, in your community, in your neighborhood, in your institution. Now, I as a doctor, Manori as a doctor, I'm sure you have done a lot of changes within the ward itself. You lead from the front, you do the correct thing, then the juniors follow suit, the nurses follow suit. They can't find recourse to corrupt practices if we are not corrupt. If you are not admitting patients, putting only if they give money, then others will also start the same thing. So like that, there are, and looking even to your duties of work. I know a lot of things in this health sector where there are junior doctors who work only one shift for the entire week, but they get the entire salary for the month plus overtime. Is that not stealing? Will not the Department of Health Services suffer from budget deficits? They can't. All that money can be channeled to sack the fellows and give them buy essential medication. It's not a case of not having money or not having enough manpower. It's maladministration, maldistribution of staff, and absolutely weakened administration. That is where the main problem is. Administrators are corrupt, they are weak, then they are allowing all the others under them to do anything.
Management, yeah. Management is the most important.
Management. There's proper management. I think you emphasize that point. What I know, and Sumana also told, I mean, a lot of very, very, very important points of bringing this change. It's implementation that is difficult because our powers are limited. Our hands are all restricted. So I think as Buddhists, as those who are following the path, follow the noble path individually, collectively, and it will have a beneficial infusing effect on those who are working around you. You let the standards.
Yes, Professor Kolita, now actually, since Dr. Sumana also mentioned, this Buddhist economics. Why not? Because you see that includes all the maybe good things, everything related to Buddhism. Why not we see how we can take it forward? Because you see, although Buddhism is there in the constitution, there are nothing to say, because even if they don't even say you must practice the 5 precepts. No, you see, you're a Buddhist country, but then that is not there, because even the IMF says the main problem our country is facing is implementation.
Yeah.
You see, implementation is the biggest problem, because you see, I must tell you just one thing. Now they say that you must have cost recovery. Now supposing if you take maybe the Ceylon Electricity Board, now they will increase the prices. So they say to recover the costs. But the thing is, we cannot pay for inefficiencies. We cannot pay for maybe wrong decisions taken by them, wrong maybe corruption, other things. So the society cannot pay for all those things. So we have to bring in efficiency. We need to bring in productivity. Now these are all mentioned, and it is there in the Buddhism that we are talking of now. So that's what I feel, that if we maybe try to bring this thing of Buddhist economics, it may have an impact on the country,
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, it's all there. It's a case of doing that. That is what is not happening. Poor administration and non-accountability. No one is accountable for whatever they are doing. And even if something is wrong, they do something wrong, they get away with it. So you have to bring the strict laws and punishment. All that is embodied in the strong management. That is why if you change the management on the one hand, and at the same time, educate the children, education. With proper education, even at some future point of time, we'll have a properly educated, disciplined lot who will know what these values are. Now it's all wrong values. They don't know ethics. stealing is the norm, giving a bribe is the norm. I mean, there can't be bribe takers if there are no people to give bribes. So person who gives the bribe is as wrong as the person who takes the bribe. But all the time we are looking at the people who are taking bribes, little realizing that you are also contributing to that by giving bribes. So it's a very vicious cycle, a chain of events that must, you have to change it somewhere. The system has to change.
And bribery itself is a network now, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a network going on unknown.
Yeah.
And
Bribery.
Sri Lanka has some of the richest people in the hotels. The very expensive rooms are all booked by locals at any given time.
Yeah.
Amazing prices. So there is money. Only 4 million or whatever has more people are now hungry. That's all that has happened. The rich continue to be rich, and the recovery of that money is, there's no way. As far as from the little I understand of it.
Jayanta has raised a hand, I noticed.
You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Watawala. It was really questions. The minorities question about why the 10 countries are more richer than other Theravadas. I think it is nothing to do with the religion, because even the Christian countries, they are not really Christians. They go to the church every Sunday. It's like a vaccination. And then they come out and they do everything. And I think the Buddhists, when I watch, they don't really follow Dhamma. They treat Buddha as a god. They do offering, the dana, to get merit back. So, but it is unfortunate to say, I think certain nations has a different character. I know my son was 6 months in training in Japan. One day he forgot his camera in the tube metro station on the bench. Next morning, he found the camera in the same place. Nobody touched it. So it's I don't think that very few people are following Dhamma. Like you, there are all these people in the screen, they are trying to follow Dhamma. All the rest are going to the temples like going to the church. And they are praying so that Buddha will help them to get better and have a better rebirth. They don't think about nirvana. The path to nirvana and path to the mundane path, they are two different directions, I think. So I think even the Nietzsche, the philosopher Nietzsche said, there are at the end, there was only one Christian. They crucified him. So this is it. I think it is unfortunate to say that certain